AlephBet.
Okay.
We'll just go into the teaching. So this week we're going to be speaking to the letter Tzade. We started, we got into it quite a bit last week, but we'll go back, or 2 weeks ago. Actually, we did not have class last week because my son's mother-in-law passed away, and so there was just too many things going on. So this is the Tzade, and its number is 90, and this is the paleoglyph. The idea, because Tzade means to hunt. Tzade means to hunt. And so the paleoglyph is a circle with a little tail on it, and there's discussion as to exactly what it is, but the idea of it, because it's to hunt, so there are those who say that it is a man with a fish on the line. So you have the line, and then perhaps that's the fish, and so he's reeling in the fish. The other idea is that it is a trap, where you make a rope, you tie a knot in it, make a loop in it, you put that on the ground, and then you get back in the bush with the other end of the rope. And when the animal steps into the loop, you pull it tight. And so back in caveman days, perhaps something like that. But I can remember making little traps like that when I was little, trying to catch rabbits and things like that. So it's the idea of hunting, to hunt. And from Tzade, we have the word tzaddik. Tzaddik is related, our next letter is going to be kuf, which is similar to the sound and the sound of it, and the sounding of it is similar to kaf. So you have kaf, and then over here you have kuf, and both of them have a K sound, or the kuf. This will be TZ. The sound of this is TZ. This will be the letter Q without a U, so basically it's the K sound. So you have the word tzaddik. So this is the word tzaddik in Hebrew. Tzaddik, dalet, kuf. And there's a reason for it ending in the kuf, which we'll see when we get into kuf. But so you have the tzaddik. And tzaddik is the word for a righteous person. So a tzaddik, a righteous person, is called a tzaddik. We have where we accept charity, donations, gifts, offerings, those kinds of things. On the back box back there, the gray box back there, it has the word tzedakah. And tzedakah, it is the same thing. Tzedakah, this is a righteous act. So in Judaism, when a person gives to charity, that's called tzedakah, a righteous act. When he does a mitzvah, when he does a good deed, it is a mitzvah. It is called a tzedakah. It is a righteous act. But usually this is when you say that I did the tzedakah. You'll hear Jewish people say that I did a tzedakah. Basically, that means that they gave to charity. They gave something to charity. So what makes someone a tzaddik? What makes something a tzaddik? So you go back to the root of it, tzade, which is what? To hunt. So a tzaddik, what we would call a righteous person, we could also say that this idea that he is a, or she is a hunter. A hunter. As in a person who hunts for deer, for game, such as that. They are a hunter. But not on that order. Not in the order that they're hunting for wild game. They are a hunter. A tzaddik is a righteous person. So what would they be hunting for?
Fishes of men.
Huh?
Fishes of men.
Okay, very good. They're hunting for souls. They're hunting for souls. They're looking for souls. Why are they looking for souls? Because Judaism teaches something that is called the divine spark. Now, as you're thinking about that, as I'm telling you about the divine spark, think of Acts chapter 2. When the Ruach HaKodesh, when the Holy Spirit comes down upon the Shlachim, the apostles that are gathered in the upper room. Remember that the Ruach HaKodesh enters into the room with the sound of a mighty rushing wind, and that what? Flames, tongues of fire appear over their heads. So while I'm talking about the divine spark, consider that. Because what Judaism teaches is that God imbued man in his creation, imbued man with a divine spark. That is, he imbued man with a holiness to him. That Adam and Chava were created as holy beings, holy creatures. The word holy means to be set apart, to be sanctified. You have the word sanctuary. All of this comes from the Latin word sanctum, which is to be holy. So a sanctuary is a place that is set apart. It's a place that is different from other places. What we would say is a holy place. It is a holy place. So in Christianity, churches call that inner place where the congregation meets, that is called the sanctuary. We also talk about giving people sanctuary. That a person who has there were in the Bible there were sanctuary cities which God named, that if a person accidentally killed someone and the family was coming after him, that person could run to one of these sanctuary cities and he could find a haven. That is, he would find protection there, that the city would protect this person. So that the family was not permitted to come in and take the person away and lynch him or what have you, or kill him in the city. He found the city actually became a place of protection for him if it was an accidental killing. Okay, so the person could run there. The only point of the person seeking sanctuary was that once he entered that city, he could never leave. He had to spend the rest of his life there. Why? Because as soon as he left, he's no longer in the sanctuary. He's now out of the safe haven. So what? The family will be waiting out there. They'll try to kill him. So as long as he's within the sanctuary, he is safe. But once he leaves the sanctuary, he's no longer safe. This is a good analogy for us for doing the following the instructions of God for us. As long as we stay within His guidelines, as long as we stay within the path or within the pasture that He has given to us to feed, that we are safe. But the moment we walk out of that pasture, the moment we get out of the path, we're no longer safe. Now that doesn't mean that you're going to get into immediate trouble as soon as you leave the path or as soon as you jump the fence and get out of the pasture. There may be some time, but sooner or later.
We will be in danger.
Huh?
We will be in danger.
You will be in danger. The possibility of danger is much greater outside than it is inside. And so this word sanctuary is the idea of a place that is set apart, that is set aside. So these cities were set aside as safe havens for people who had accidentally killed somebody. The inside of the church where the congregation assembles is called the sanctuary because it is a place that is set apart. And it is a place that is set apart where nothing else, technically nothing else is supposed to take place there within that area, because that is reserved for the worship of God. And so nothing else is really supposed to be done. That's why it's called a sanctuary. It's a place set apart for this specific purpose. And so sanctum, to be holy, to be set apart. And so when God made Adam and Chava, He made them to be holy people. He made them to be holy people. They were holy creatures. That is, that they were set apart. They were set apart from all other creatures. All other creation. Mankind is unique in being set apart. There's a story in Judaism that this caused a jealousy to rise in the Malachim, in the angels. Because before God had created Adam and Chava, of course all of the Malachim were created, and then He creates this aspect of creation, this physical aspect of creation. So the angels, the Malachim, were created first, and then He creates this space, this area, this part of creation, the universe. When God creates Adam, He puts within Adam His own likeness. If you remember what He says in the creation of Adam and Chava, He says, "Let us create man in our own image and in our own likeness." And what Judaism teaches is that it's not that we are God. It is not that we have the physical characteristics of God. Because, number one, there is only one God, and He alone is God. Therefore, I can never be God. Okay? Number two, it is not that we look at the image of God does not mean our physical appearance. Why? Because God is spirit. And spirit has no form. God is Elohim Ruach. Elohim Ruach. Stick with the red. Elohim Ruach. It's the one that works. In saying Elohim Ruach, we're saying here that God is spirit. Saying what? Well, the word Ruach is the word that we translate spirit. But I believe I've taught this before. in this class, maybe not, but I think I have, that this word ruach, spirit, does not just mean spirit. It also means breath, and it also means wind. In other words, flowing air. So, to give us a physical example, twice in the Brit Chadashah, in the New Testament, this example is thrown at us using the play on words of ruach. The first is in John chapter 3, when Yeshua is talking to Nicodemus, to Nicodemus. And he is speaking about being born again. And he says that one must be born first of water and then of the Spirit, of the Ruach. And then he goes into an analogy that if you don't understand the Hebrew, if you don't know the Hebrew, perhaps it's a little difficult for us to grasp a hold of, because he goes into this tangent, apparently, of the wind. So, I'll read it for you, John chapter 3. In John chapter 3 and verse 5, Yeshua answered, "Most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born of water and Haruach, the Spirit, he cannot enter Malchut Elohim, the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of Ruach is Ruach, the Spirit." Now remember that this term that he's using, Ruach, Spirit, also means these two. So you can say, except unless one is born of the breath, he cannot be of the kingdom of God. And remember that later on, what does Yeshua do? Remember, he breathes on them, and he says to them, what? Receive the Ruach HaKodesh, receive the Holy Spirit. You can say that he says, receive the holy breath. Also remember that it means wind. So, if he says, that which is born of the flesh is flesh, that is which is born of the Ruach is Ruach, the Spirit, the breath, the wind. So he says, what? Unless one is born of the Spirit, of the Ruach, the breath, the wind, he cannot enter the kingdom. He cannot enter Malchut Elohim, the kingdom of God. So verse 8, he uses this analogy. He says the Ruach, using the same word, he says the Ruach blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but you cannot tell where it comes from and where it goes. That is translated in your Bibles as what? Wind. Right? So, John 3:8, the wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but you cannot see it. You don't know where it came from. You don't know where it's going. You simply experience its effect. He's using the same term. And that's why I tell you that he's using a play on this word ruach. Why? Because ruach is spirit, is wind. So in Acts chapter 2, when the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, comes to the upper room, where the Shlachim are gathered, the apostles, the sent ones, are gathered, and the Ruach HaKodesh comes down upon them, what do they hear? The sound of a mighty rushing wind. Why? It's this play here. They are experiencing the play on that word, which is exactly what Yeshua says in John 3. You hear the sound of it. It does not say that there was a mighty rushing wind. You know, papers blowing everywhere, their hair all out, whatever, like they're standing in front of a fan. When my dad was, when my dad started our little Baptist church, when we grew up, it was probably about this size, the size of this room. And there was a window over here. There was a big window like that, but that opened up, and it was a wood frame building. It was an old Methodist church building, and had a window over here, and then the double doors of the entrance, and then the window over here. We did not have air conditioning at that time. Okay, we're talking early 60s, what have you, and so air conditioning had not even hit the valley except for HEB. If you wanted to get out of the heat of the summer, you went to HEB because that's where the air conditioning was. Or a store like that. So we did not have air conditioning. And so what we did have was we had this huge, like, attic fan. It literally stood like this tall. And it was sitting up on a table in front of that back window. And it had 4 big blades on it. And when you plugged it in, it had no switch. You plugged it in and that turned it on. You plug it in, it was like an airplane propeller. It would take off, whoosh, 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 and suddenly it would take off, and whoosh, this breeze, I say breeze, would fill the church as that air circulated, coming from the outside and circulated. Now, a lot of times in the summer, right, the worship service, the Sunday morning worship service, and in the summertime it's already 90 degrees outside. It's simply bringing hot, humid air from the outside in. So we're just blowing around hot air. But it was better than sitting in the non-moving air, the still hot, humid air. So the deal was, for us young folk, the deal was to sit in front of that fan. Because the closer you were to the fan, number one, the closer you were to the fan, the cooler you stayed. Number two, the less you could hear, the less you heard the message were kids. So kids don't always like to pay attention to the messages, right? Mm-hmm. So we could sit back there and doodle and dawdle or whatever. But there was this huge fan. At night, it became an interesting endeavor. I don't see it so prominently anymore, but back in those days, May and June, late May and June, through the month of June, meant June bugs. Now, today we see June bugs here and there. Back in those days, there were June bugs everywhere. They came out at night. And they would be in these hovels, they would make mounds of themselves, and they would just be crawling all over and flying through the air. And we literally used to catch them. We'd take little threads off of our pants, off of our shirt. We'd take these little threads and we would tie them around the head, and we would have these pet June bugs that we would fly around in the air. So these June bugs would get caught up in this fan.
Splat.
Well, it wasn't a splat. They would literally go ting. You could hear them hitting the blade, ting, and then they would get shot through the church auditorium. So at night, it was kind of interesting. When you heard that first little tick of the June bug hitting, everybody ducked, because that thing, they're hard. And they would hurt when they come through, so everybody would kind of duck, and that thing would go flying through the roof. The sound of a mighty rushing wind. And sometimes the girls with their, they had their longer hair or whatever, so their hair would get blown out in front of them. And interesting kind of things when we were growing up. But, so it's the sound of it's not that there was a mighty rushing wind, but he says that there was the sound of a mighty rushing wind. So a kind of a thing. Why? Because of what ruach means. Because of what ruach means. So a ruach, does the wind have form? Does breath have form? No. It has no form, it has no shape, it is a gaseous thing, so it has no physical form, container, anything like that. So when we say that we're made in the likeness and the image of Hashem, of God, we are not saying that we look like Him. Why? Because He is this. Thus He has no form, He has no shape, He has no body. He is a spirit. That we are made in, and the Hebrew term for that is B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. That we are made B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, means that God has given to us His attributes. That is, He gives us the opportunity. He made Adam to be a citizen, a member of the kingdom. That He has given him a foundation, that He has given him glory and beauty and honor and mercy and judgment and strength, kindness, grace, wisdom, understanding. These are the attributes. The attributes that we were posting during the counting of the Omer. So these things that are of God, He places within man, and this is what it means, B'Tselem Elohim, to be created in the image of God. That we have the attributes. This is how man is set apart. That He imbued us with a nefesh shemayim, a spirit from above, that is inclined to the deity, that is inclined, that is drawn to God, that is drawn to heaven. But He has also given us what we have talked about, what we have spoken to, a nefesh bechama, an animal spirit, an animal instinct, that is drawn to the physical, that is drawn to the things of this life and this world. And we have discussed how the melachim, how the angels of heaven, are created with the nefesh magim, with this heavenly instinct, this heavenly soul, this heavenly spirit, but not with the nefesh bechama. They do not have the physical instinct. Why? Because they too also are this. So they do not have the instinct, they do not have the soul of creation of this world. On the other side, we have what are called the behemoth, the creatures, the animals. The animals have the nefesh behemah, they have the animal instinct, but they do not have the nefesh shemayim. They do not have the heavenly instinct, saying what? There is no acknowledgement of God within the animal kingdom. There is no inclination to God. They simply exist as they are, living their life day by day in the physical realm with the physical instinct. And they are driven by this instinct. So what is the difference between the animals, between the animal kingdom, humankind, and the angels, Malachim? So the angelic realm only has the heavenly instinct. The animal realm only has the earthly instinct. Humans are created with both. So we are called in effect, we're the go-between, between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. So we have an instinct to those things which are physical. We call them our drives, our our hungers, our lust, these kinds of things. Okay? This is of the physical nature. But then we have this desire of the deity. We have this desire of God, of heavenly things. And so that is the nefesh shamayim within us. So the angels do not have this, and this is what sets us apart. This is why we would be considered kadosh, is the Hebrew word, holy, sanctified, set apart. We're different. We're different from the animals in that we have this heavenly instinct. We're different from the angels in that we have this physical instinct. And we are to God a special treasure. Which is what in Shemot, in Exodus chapter 19, this is what God tells Moshe to tell the people. That if you will do what I command you, you will be to me a special treasure, or a treasured people. So Adam and Chava are created as special. Because of this, because God considers them to be a special creation. And remember that all the rest of creation, God speaks into being. But with Adam, does he speak Adam into being? Does he speak Adam into being? Does he create Adam with his speech?
Yes.
With his hand, it says. That he formed Adam out of the clay of the earth, and then did what? Breathed into him. This is the Ruach. This is B'Tselem Elohim. He breathed into Adam, literally. See, remember? Breath, Ruach. Spirit, Ruach. Rain, Ruach. He breathed into him his own breath. His own spirit. This is what is called in Judaism the divine spark. The divine spark. Which all of humanity has. Every human being is created B'Tselem Elohim. Every human being is created in the image of God. Saying what? Every human being has the attributes, the ability of the attributes of God. As I've told you before, the difference is this. For many people, those attributes are not switched on. They're in the off position, and they need to be switched on. So you look at the people, you look at a person who is hard, mean, ugly, angry, then we would consider not to be a good person. Yes, even the ISIS fighters are created B'Tselem Elohim. They are created in the image of God. And they have these attributes within them. Then why are they so mean? Why are they so cruel? Why do they chop people's heads off? Why do they do this? Why do they do that? Because those attributes are not switched on within them. Yes, they are created with the divine spark. But that divine spark is not a light within them. Now, I said about the divine spark. Again, remember that in Acts chapter 2, when the Holy Spirit came down upon the Shlachim, the apostles there in the upper room, what appears over their head? Flames of fire. Tongues of fire. This is the divine spark, so to speak, coming into existence. Coming not into existence, but coming into fruition within them. Saying what? Every human being has the possibility to be found. Listen to those words carefully. To be found, to be saved, to be ignited. Every human being has the possibility to find God and to change. Why? Because every human being is created b'tselem Elohim. Every human being is created with the image of God, in the image of God. Every human being has a divine spark, has this affinity to God that has been switched off because of man's wickedness, because of our sin. It's been switched off. Have you noticed that the more that a person does wrong, the more that a person does wickedly, the more hardened he becomes to wickedness? Saying what? The more I watch inappropriate television, the more hardened I become to those things. That what? It doesn't faze me anymore. I was telling the class last night when we were growing up, my dad was very strict about what he permitted us to watch on TV. Now we're talking the 60s through the early 70s. Okay? I graduated 40 years ago this past May. So we're talking, I graduated in 1977, so we're talking Andy Griffith, Beverly Hillbillies, that era. Dad was very careful about what he allowed us to watch. Why? Because the things that people watch on TV today, people back then would have been horrified. Literally horrified. I mean, there would have been riots in the street. I'm not kidding you. There would have been riots in the street. Television back then, you know, Leave It to Beaver and these kinds of things was so tame. We didn't consider that tame. Gilligan's Island. We did not consider that tame. And even that, you know, because the girls were walking around in skimpy things, whatever, Marianne, you know, her little shorts and everything like that, Dad was very hesitant to let us watch things like that because he did not want to expose us to those things. Back then, women were, for the most part, very modest. The women wore dresses and they were usually down below the knees, and the older women, I can remember little old ladies coming to church and they wore their dresses and they were down here and they had scarves on their head. Back then, like Letty does here, the ladies wore hats all the time and things like that. Very modest. They're, you know, not showing cleavage, and you had to have sleeves on your dresses and things like that. This was in the 60s. Now the Great Revolution was the sleeveless dress around 1964-65. That was a shocking move to a lot of people because we weren't used to that. And by the end of the 60s, the mini dresses and all of that, people were aghast. Modest people were aghast at such things because it was considered to be improper, indecent, immodest. So we become hardened. Now today, what? We don't think about these things. I do not go to the beach very much these days. Back then we used to take 2, 3, 4 trips down to the beach. But back then the island was not like it was today. Back then you literally drove onto the beach and you could find a place of isolation where it was just the family. And we would camp out overnight. In fact, I remember one time, and it wasn't tents like we had to, it was heavy canvas tarps that Dad would string together. And he'd put a little roof on it and such. And I remember one night the tide came up higher than what they were expecting. And I never will forget, I was about 6, 7 years old, and I'm there sleeping on a cot, and I hear the sound of rushing water. And I sit up and I look, my blanket's all wet, I look, and a box of saltine crackers was floating out the door of the tent. I'll never forget that sight. What am I saying? Well, people would think it would be immodest, well, I don't know, today not anymore, for a girl to be walking around in her bra and panties. But if you go to the beach, much of what the girl is wearing is nothing more than bra and panties. Somehow that's not immodest, but it's immodest for a woman to walk outside of her house into her yard or whatever in a bra and panties. But if she walks around in a two-piece bathing suit and a bikini, what have you, that's not immodest. Explain that. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. What I'm saying is that bathing suits back then, for the most part, were much more modest than they are today. Now today, with all of these insane movie stars and what have you, they are walking around showing their bras and panties and everything else. So, I'm just saying. But why? Because as we expose ourselves to wickedness, we become hardened to it. This is part of the problem with Christianity today, with the majority of it. You cannot tell, how do you distinguish between what is supposed to be the world and what is supposed to be the church when the church is acting like the world? And the world has come into the church. How do you distinguish? We were at a church in California, rather famous church, back around 2006. And it was a modern church with modern technology and modern influences, and there were so many people that they had a viewing area, and the service on the inside, we were outside the church, and the service on the inside was televised out. They had this big giant screen TV, and we were sitting in kind of like an amphitheater, and they had shade over us. It was a nice thing. They had little, air conditioners blowing down on the people and everything to keep us cool, and it was, it was interesting if I were going to the theater. But they had these tables with umbrellas and stools and whatever, and you could go into the coffee shop and buy your latte and buy your this and buy your that, buy your different drinks, your sodas and whatever. And so all people were coming in, and they had their lattes and their sodas and their what, and they were sitting under their umbrellas with their sunglasses on, but they were worshiping the Lord, and they were praising and all of this kind of stuff. And you couldn't tell if you were at a church service or a rock concert. What's the difference? It was the same. And this is what I'm saying. That the world has come into the church, and you can't tell the difference. It's a program, it's a show, it's theater, it's a concert, a rock concert. And everybody gets all, it's all based on feelings and emotions rather than truth. Messages are shallow. Can't preach any more than 15 minutes because that is the span of people's, that's the attention span today. You go any longer than that, you lose everybody. So we become hardened, and this is why these ISIS people and such as that, we look at them as evil, and they are evil. How did they get that way? Because their hearts were darkened and their hearts were hardened. And once you slice somebody's head off, from what I understand, it becomes easier to do the next one. Until you become, yes, to the whole thing. You become desensitized to it. It does nothing to you. So I'm saying all of this to say that every human being is created b'tselem Elohim, even those whom we consider to be the worst and the most wicked. Yes, they are created b'tselem Elohim. They are created in the image of God. And they are created with the divine spark, with the breath of God. Because this is passed down from human to human, generation to generation. It started when God first created Adam. And through Adam, these things are passed down to us generation to generation, all the way through. So, that ISIS fighter? Is he a child? Is he a descendant of Adam? Yes, he is. Rapists, murderers, think of the worst. They are all children of Adam. And they are created with the same dual nature that you and I have. The difference is their switches have been turned off. They've become hardened. So they dwell in the darkness, they dwell in the evil. They dwell, the scripture says, in the midst of iniquity. So, how did we start all of this up? How did we start all of this? What? Tzade is what? Tzade means what? To hunt. Tzaddik is what? A righteous person, which is a hunter who is hunting for souls. The tzaddik is a person who is looking for the lost souls. What do we mean by the lost souls? The hunter, what are we hunting for? What Judaism teaches is we are looking for the divine sparks. We're hunting for the divine sparks. Saying what? When I look at that person that I pass on the street in Walmart or what have you, when I see this person, how do I see them? What is my perspective? We've spoken to this before. What is my perspective of them? My perception of them? My thought of them? Do I see them as a hustler, as a prostitute, as a drunk, as a druggie, as a this, as a that? When that person is all covered with tattoos, that girl is all covered with tattoos, and she's wearing the halter top and the shorts, and all of these kinds of things. What do? We classify that person. We put them in a classification. Right?
Basically, we judge the person.
Yes, we're judging the person. We're putting them in a classification. We're saying that this person is with this group. And I see that guy with the head shaved up to here, and he's got that little tuft of hair here, and he's got the earring on this side, and he's got the big, I don't know what over here, the bamboo or whatever over here, right? And he's got the studs in his lip and all of this kind of stuff, and he's walking around in his muscle shirt. And he's all like this, and he's walking around all big and tough and everything like that, and I put that person in a classification. Not a good one. It's not somebody that I would think that I would want to hang around, or those kinds of things. If you drive by the Placita Park over here, you drive by the park, there are certain women hanging out there. And you can see it. You know what they're doing. And so you put them in a classification. And on that side of the tracks, there's a lot not so much now, but back in the day, I guess still somewhat, but back in the day, back when I was growing up, that was the poor side of town. Just across the tracks here, that was the poor side of town. And in fact, from the beginning of Harlingen, that has always been the poor side of town. The west side was the poor side. Over here, along from Jackson Street over, Harrison, Tyler, and on down. Madison and all of those, Monroe, and as you go down further and further, Lincoln and all of that area over there, for the most part, this was the white part of town. This was the more wealthy side of town. That was the Hispanic, that was the Mexican side of town. That was across the tracks, that was where the poor people lived. These were the what do you call them, the colonias and the, but there will be little groups that, and you look at old pictures of Harlingen and you can see it, and the tracks were the dividing. And this is where the term comes from, not here only, but in many cities, that they are from the wrong side of the tracks. This is where the term comes from. So even today, when you go to that side of town, you see the little tiny buildings. Go down Jackson Street, and all of those little buildings, and coming back the other way. What is the next street over? I don't remember, but anyway, the next street over. All of those little buildings there, those little businesses there, and everything. Almost all of those buildings, when I was growing up, almost all of those buildings were either restaurants or bars. And you have the theater here, and then you have the theater down there. The theater here showed, for the most part, English movies. The theater down there showed mostly Spanish movies. So when I was growing up, you could literally come through this part of town on a Saturday night, and you could see the drunks walking around, walking the streets. Literally. Weaving their way, trying to get home or whatever. Going from bar to bar. Saying what? When you see that, we have the tendency to classify that person. And it's not a good classification. Now, for all of these people that we are classifying, that we are judging, we're judging on the basis of appearance. Right? The girl with the tattoos down her arm. The guy with the studs and the earrings and the muscle shirt. The prostitute. The drug addict. The drunk. While we are judging them on the basis of their appearance, what we fail very many times, very critically, what we fail to take into account is how they got to be where they are, because nobody starts that way. No baby starts out saying, I want to be a prostitute. No baby starts off saying, I want to be an alcoholic. I want to be a drunk. Wake up every morning sick with a hangover. But I'm so addicted to this that I can't let go of it. So every night I go and do it again. Living basically what? Like an animal? No human being starts off with that as their desire for life. This is what we have forgotten. What brought them into this position? Because I'll tell you, for every drunk that you come across, there's a broken heart. Something happened in that person's life. And he's trying to remove the pain, the hurt of life. Do we approve of his method and his style? No. But you and I also know pain and hurt. We've been there. Saying what? Our position is not to judge a person. And this is what Judaism teaches. But to have empathy. To understand that there's a reason why that person is where they are. Somewhere they got off the track and they're having a very difficult time getting back on the track. So do you understand the setup where I've taken you this far? Then what is my responsibility? My responsibility is this, to go out and to hunt for these lost souls. Why? Because they also are divine sparks. They are the creation of God. They're created B'Tselem Elohim. They are created in the image of God. And it is our responsibility as followers of Yeshua, as believers, as the children of God, to go out and find these lost souls, so that their spark can be rekindled, so that their life can be renewed, so that they can leave where they are and move up to a higher place in their life. This is why we are here. So Janet, you, when we started, you said something when I was asking about what are we hunting? What does it mean to be a hunter? And you remember what your response was?
Fishers of men.
Is this not exactly what Yeshua tells his Talmudim, tells the disciples? What does it mean to be a fisher of men? You're going to go out and cast real men? To be a fisher of men, this is what Yeshua was telling them. We can put it another way, because to be a fisher of men is to be a hunter. That's what a fisherman does, is it not? He goes out and he hunts for the fish and he brings them in.
That's the right place.
Hmm?
That's the right place to be.
Sometimes not. I can tell you, I know a lot of people, sometimes you hit the right spot out there on the bay and sometimes you don't. You have to go out and you have to look. I have my sunglasses over here. I don't know how many of y'all have ever been out on the bay, but my oldest son has a boat and he takes us out now and then, and we go out on the bay, and I wear these sunglasses because they're polarized. So it removes the glare and you can actually see into the water. And what do? Well, you go out there and you start looking for the fish. You start looking for the signs of the fish. One of the signs of a fish is they start what is called tailing. Tailing is where the redfish are feeding off of the bottom. So in order to feed off of the bottom, they go like this, so that their tails are up and their tails are actually sticking out of the water. And you can see when there's a bunch of them, there'll be 10 or 15 of them, and you can see all these little tails that look like little, but you can see them moving around in the water, and you know that they're feeding off of the bottom. So you try to sneak up on them and throw your line in there. Trout have a tendency to skim the water. That is, that they eat and they regurgitate. And I think, if I remember correctly, that this is that this is a signal to other trout that there's food there. Basically, they regurgitate some of the food, and it causes an oily skim to come out onto the top of the water, and you can see the skim from a bit of a ways off. You can see the difference in the texture of the water. Because it's oily, it kind of flattens the water, flattens the waves and everything like that. So you see this what do you call it? Oil slick, it looks like. But it's from the fish. And so when you see that, you go over there and you throw in your line. Because that means that trout have either been there recently or are there right now. Another thing that you look for is birds. Because birds eat what? Seabirds eat what? Fish. So where you see birds, they're soaring, they're flying, they're circling above the water. What does that tell you? There's probably a school of fish there. So that's what I'm saying, when you're looking for signs. It's not always just that you just go out and you know exactly where to fish and you throw them out. Because sometimes the fish are here, sometimes they're there, they move around, they migrate. So you have to go look for them. You have to hunt them down. Okay? So he said what? I will make you fishers of men. Saying what? What was he telling the Talmudim? What was he telling the disciples? Your responsibility is to go out. If you're a fisher of men, you're a hunter. Your responsibility is to go out and to hunt people. Not with guns, not that kind of hunting, but what? Hunting for the lost souls, hunting for the lost sparks. So that they can be re-engaged. So that those switches can be turned on in them. So that they will realize that they are also created with these attributes, that these attributes will come alive in them. So that the Spirit will come alive in them. So that this flame, this divine spark, will come alive in them. How do you make an ember glow and come into flame? You ever start a campfire? No? You blow on it. You have a campfire, it goes out at night, it goes into the embers. In the morning, you want to cook breakfast. What do? You get some straw, you get some sticks, whatever, little starter wood, and you put that on top of the ember, and then you get down and you blow on it. And that causes what? The wind coming, the breath coming out of your mouth causes the ember to flare up. And then what? Poof, it catches fire. So this is the whole idea that's taking place here. The thing is this. Am I going to find these people inside this room? Or inside a church? What does a hunter do? What does a hunter do? He hunts. Saying what? To say that I'm a fisher of men, when Yeshua says, follow me and I will make you fishers of men, the idea is this, that I need to go out and look for them. I need to find them where they are. They're not here. They're out there. And I need to go and find them. And this is exactly what a tzaddik does. This is the whole concept of being a righteous person. A righteous person is a person who goes out looking for lost souls. Who goes out looking for the lost sparks. So that they can be ignited. So that the flame of God, of the Spirit of God, can be kindled within them. So when Yeshua says, I will make you fishers of men, another way that we could put that is he said, well, I will make you a tzaddik. Saying what? A hunter? But the meaning is a righteous person. What is a righteous person? A righteous person is not just a person who obeys God. Righteous, in other words, a righteous person, it does not make, a righteous person is not just a person who's keeping Shabbat, who's wearing tzitzit, who reads their Bible and they pray every day and they're doing all of these things. That does not make a person righteous. Because a righteous person is exactly this. He's a hunter of the divine sparks that have been lost. To bring them in. So we have the word tzedakah on the box back there. We have the word tzedakah. Which means what? Righteous act. What is tzedakah? What is giving to charity? That's what tzedakah means. Basically, as I started this evening, that's what the word tzedakah means to Judaism. When a person says that I gave tzedakah, they're saying that I gave to charity. What's the purpose of giving to charity? What's the purpose of giving to ministry, to giving to the church, to giving to whatever? The whole purpose is this. To give tzedakah is to enable the hunter to hunt. To enable the hunter to hunt. Now, I'm going to close with this thought, because as we go from Tzade, we come into Kuf. You'll notice this is the Hebrew word for tzaddik. Tzaddik, A-D-I-K, tzaddik.
What's the little marking that's between the kuf and the dalet?
This one here?
No.
This one here.
Yeah.
It's the yud.
A yud?
A yud, yes. What happens is this I sound here connects here, so it kind of lengthens tzaddik. So oftentimes in the second syllable, if you have this I sound here, there's going to be a yud that follows it. Simply to, like that, the yud is acting as part of the vowel. Okay, kind of like the word they. You're taking the E and you're stretching it out. So the same thing happens in Hebrew. So tzaddik, you have the tzaddik, A, Dalet, E. So literally tzaddik with a Q, but you'll usually see it spelled this way because it's a kaf, the kuf. It's a kuf. So what about the kuf? Well, first of all, the term kuf has no meaning of its own. It has no meaning of its own. It is what is called a root. A root the term kuf is a root for other words, but it has no meaning of its own. It is usually found, you'll notice that the paleograph here, what does this look like to you? Huh? Saturn. Okay, good. So basically what it is it's a setting sun. Most scholars believe that this is a setting sun with the horizon. This is the horizon. Okay? And you have the sun setting. What happens when the sun sets? It makes its way to the other side, and within more or less 12 hours, what happens? It rises again. Right? And then it comes around, it sets again, and then what? It rises again. Sunrise, sunset, as the Fiddler on the Roof song says. Sunrise, sunset. Anyway, start dancing. I need a cake. So when we do that, you go from sunset, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, and what do you have? A cycle. So the Samech taught us about the cyclical nature of life. Kuf is the root to most words having to do with cycling. So, you have a kaf, a dalet, a vav, and a shin. We have not got to shin yet, but notice, remember, that the word tzaddik, which means a righteous person, ends with a kaf. This idea of cycling. So let's do a little practice here. So the sound of the kuf is what? Q. This is a vowel. Do you know what it is? A. This is a dalet. So what? Okay. This is a vav, but it's called a choleh because the dalet is here and there's no other vowel. So this becomes a vowel, which is what? O. this is the letter Shin, which is SH. So what we have here is Kadosh. Say Kadosh. You will often see it, like I said, you will often see it spelled with a K. Malachim say, the angels say every day, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Adonai El Elyon. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. This word Kadosh is the word holy. So, those of you who were at the memorial service for Sharon, Charity's mother, last Shabbat, you heard the mourners Kaddish. Yikadal v'yikadash merava. Yikadal v'yikadash merava. So it's called the mourners Kaddish. Mourners Kaddish. And what the mourners Kaddish is, it's not the mourners sanctification. Not that the mourners are being sanctified, but that the mourners are sanctifying God. This is a blessing that the mourners say to God, particularly upon the death of a loved one. In the mourners Kaddish, there is no the word dead or death or dying, died or any of those things. There's nothing about death in this, but it is completely, absolutely extolling, praising, lifting up God. So we say, Yikadal v'yikadash merava. Great and holy is your mighty name. Who is above all music and all praise and all psalms and all psalms. And he says, we will praise you, glorify you, mention you. We will lift up your name. And the whole song, the whole bracha, blessing, is all about praising God. Because we praise Him even in the worst of times. We praise Him, praise should go forth from our heart. And so the mourners Kaddish is literally would be the mourners sanctification. Another form is when we, at the end of Shabbat service, where we say the blessing over the wine, it's called Kaddish, a Kiddush, which is the sanctification of the wine. Saying what? That this wine is set apart for special use. That this wine, we're using this cup of wine to thank God for His creation. So the Kiddush says, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pericha ka'afen, amen. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. So we're blessing God for creation. And so this cup is set aside as a special cup to thank God for His creation. So what does all of this have to do with what we've been talking about tonight? That the word Tzade, remember there's a reason why the letters are next to each other. Because you have Tzade, the Kuf finishes off the Tzade. The relationship is here. Tzade. If I say Tzade, what do I have? What do I have? Tzaddik. Saying what? A tzaddik is not just a hunter. But what makes this person righteous? It's not just that he's a hunter. What makes the person righteous? Holiness. What sets you apart is the holiness factor. What is the holiness factor? It is not what you are doing, it is why you are doing it. That is the holiness factor. Because I can get my dog to sit. You see what I'm saying? My dog is trained to sit and to lay down. It's not what you're doing, it's why you're doing it. You've heard the saying, right? You can get a monkey to do that. Why do they say that? Meaning what? What does that mean?
Easy to do.
There's nothing special there. What makes a tzedakah, a righteous act, special is the fact that it is done in the spirit of holiness, in the climate of holiness. What do we mean by that? Remember this, that it is cyclical. Saying what? Tzaddik is a person of faith. But this is more than just, you see, you can have this. And that does not make you a tzaddik. Because even though you're this, here's what counts. It is good to do things out of obedience. But God judges us more than just simply being obedient. The scripture tells us that He knows the motives of the heart. He knows not only what we are doing, but He knows why we are doing it. He said that when Mashiach comes, that He will divide the people, right? According to Jewish tradition, He will divide the people by smelling them, by sniffing them. So I hope you had your deodorant on. No, what the sages say is that what he is smelling, what he is sniffing is their holiness. He can smell the holiness, that to him it is like a sweet perfume. So the ones on whom he smells holiness, those he sets to the side. The ones whom he cannot smell the holiness, to him, they stink. He pushes them to the other side. Okay? It's not just this, it is also this motive. Why? Alright. Mother tells the son, dishes are piled up in the sink. So she tells the son, I want you to do the dishes. You need to do the dishes. So the son does the dishes. Is that good? Yes. Why did he do that? Why did he do the dishes? Because his mother said to do the dishes, so he did the dishes. This, you see, that's what this is. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. The next day, the son comes home. Mother's not home. Son comes home, he sees the dishes in the sink. She doesn't tell him anything. She doesn't say anything. He just sees the dishes in the sink, so he does the dishes. You see what I'm saying? You see the difference between the two? Now he's doing it, why? Because he has to? It's still pleasing to his mother, correct? But this time it's not because he has to. This time he chooses of his own accord to do this because, yes, he knows it will be pleasing to his mother. As a parent, are you pleased that your child does something that you tell your child to do, that they obey you? Does that make you pleased? Yes. Is it not more pleasing when the child does an act on their own that they know will be pleasing to you? That's even more pleasing. So consider God with you and me. Is he pleased when we are obedient to him? Yes, but with the caveat that he gave you a command. He told you to do this. And so you did it because he said to do it. How much more when without being told, without being reminded, you just walk in and you see something, you see what needs to be done, and you simply do it. Because you love God. And it's as simple as that. This is what makes a tzaddik a tzaddik. This is what makes a tzedakah a tzedakah. The kuf is there. What? That this becomes an act of holiness. What makes it an act of holiness? It becomes holy unto God when we're doing it, not because I have to do it, but I'm doing it because I want to do it. Because I love him. And so this act is dedicated, this thing that I'm doing is dedicated to him as my act of love for him. So what? Tzade. Notice the tzade, to hunt. Notice that there's no kuf there. It's hunting anything. It's hunting for wealth, hunting for possession. It's hunting anything. But the minute you add the kuf on there, the minute you add the kuf, it becomes a different thing. The mission changes. Why? Because the attitude changes. Because this is done with the heart toward God, not just in obedience, but out of motive, out of desire to express my love for him. How do I express my love for God? You shall love Adonai Elohecha, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. How do I do that? And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Who is my neighbor? This is your neighbor. So when you see that person walking down the street and we begin to categorize them, classify them, oftentimes not in a good way, I'm not loving that person as myself. I'm putting that person down beneath me, even mentally, even in my heart. I'm putting that person down. And that makes me the arrogant one, the person of pride, arrogance. Why? That person's no different from me. We're both created, B'Tselem Elohim. We're both created with the divine spark, with the ability. The difference is this. I got mine switched on. They have not yet. Somebody needs to switch them on. This is what our mission is, to go hunting for these people, to switch on those attributes. How? They need to have a confrontation with God. God's the one who does the switching, no? Who switched you on? Who made you what you are? Who switched you on? Not a trick question. Who turned you on? God.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, it kind of sounds like proselytizing, and I thought the Jews didn't proselytize.
That's a trick.
I didn't mean it to be a trick.
No. It's a trick that they want you to think that. Because the truth is, today, yes, a lot of Jews do not proselytize. Some are beginning to. In the days of Yeshua, they were known for their proselytizing. They were known for going out and gathering in the Gentiles. This is why a big congregation, a big part of the people of Yeshua's time living even in Jerusalem and in all that area were proselytes. What does it mean, proselyte? That means that a rabbi went out and spoke to them about Torah, taught them about God, and brought them in. We know that several of the followers of Yeshua were exactly this. We know that Cornelius was this. And one of the arguments that Yeshua made with the Pushim, with the Pharisees, was exactly that. He told them, he criticized them. He said, you'll go across the ocean to make a believer out of a Gentile, but you won't go across the city to help out your own brother. So back in those days, Jews were very well known. If you went into Greece or into Turkey or any of those nations there, the synagogues were actually mixed groups of people. There were Jews, and there were proselytes. There were people who were learning about Judaism, learning Torah, learning these kinds of things. In fact, Paul tells them, you have the Torah is taught in the synagogues weekly. He's talking about the Gentiles. So it is the reason why the proselytism stopped, was brought to a halt in a great way, was because it started at the dispersion, at the Roman dispersal. But then, especially as the persecution of the Jewish people grew in the Gentile nations, so that for the most part that the Jews would have to go underground. And in doing that, they become assimilated. And they don't want to like here in the United States, you would see, if you were to see, for the most part, like down here, if you were to see a Jewish person walking down the street, you would have no clue that they were Jewish.
It sounds like it's only the Christian Jews or Messianic Jews that did that. What about Jews who don't accept?
Today or back then?
Either one.
Back then, all Jews, all of the rabbis were involved in proselytizing.
Even though they did not accept them as a
Yep. Oh, yeah. Because the whole idea was to take the Torah to the nations. This is what they're calling it. And in fact, the book of Isaiah speaks to that Israel was to be a light to the nations. They were to take Torah to the nations.
The Gentile nations.
Yes. To teach them. See, they were to be this whole thing of Yeshua, that you are the light of the world. Well, this was not just a saying that Yeshua came up with. This was something that was commonly taught back then. That they were supposed to be the light to the nations. They were supposed to be a light to the world, to show them this is the way to worship God. This is the way to be pleasing to God. This is how you obey Him and bring His blessing down upon you. And so wherever there were Jewish synagogues back in their time, wherever there were Jewish synagogues, which was all over the world, these things were being taught to the Gentiles. They went as missionaries. Now today, like I said, especially when the Crusades started and all of that, and they had to go underground and everything like that, well, you didn't even want anybody to know you were Jewish. So much less go out and teaching Torah and all of those kind of things, and it would cost you a head. But that is changing, so that you have There are certain Orthodox, certain ultra-Orthodox groups that are actually starting to reach out. There are some Reform. I'm friends with a rabbi on Facebook who is a Reform rabbi, and one of his ministries is bringing people in, Gentiles, and he encourages them to participate, to take up Torah, to participate in the festivals and things like that. The group Chabad, there are several rabbis with Chabad who reach out and minister to Gentiles who, are looking, and they have ministries. They have pages that are set up to help people, to explain Judaism to people, and how to convert and all of these kinds of things. So where it used to be considered a not good thing, more and more the Jews are returning to that style, to making converts. So it was very prevalent in Yeshua's day among all manners of Judaism. It died off during the persecution of the Jewish people, and especially during the Middle Ages, up until about 20 years ago, and now especially in the last 2 or 3 years, 4 years, it's really starting to pick up again. So, okay, so everybody got this? We'll take off with Kuf next week. We'll get into the depth of it. This was just an opener for you to show you the relationship between Tzade and Kuf. By the way, this is a Tzade Sofi. It looks like a Y, okay, like a big Y. Its tail will drop below the line. The Kuf also, the tail drops below the line. And we'll get into more of that next week. So with that we say, Rachot Shalom V'Laila Tov.